The envelope arrived at 03:11 hours, delivered by a courier who refused to meet Marcus Stone's eyes. Smart man. Most wolves knew better than to look directly at the AlphaKing, especially at 3 in the morning, when exhaustion carved shadows under his jaw and made his silver eyes look more predatory than human. Marcus dismissed the courier with a gesture and opened the envelope alone in his office, the massive space silent except for the hum of climate control and the distant patrol footsteps of guards who never slept. The autopsy report slid across his desk, photographs scattering like accusations. He'd seen death before, caused plenty of it himself during 20 years in the Marine Corps, but something about these images made his wolf stir restlessly beneath his skin, a low growl of recognition he couldn't explain. Jason Reeves, 34, Packless, found tortured and executed on neutral territory 3 days ago. The medical examiner's clinical language couldn't hide the brutality, extensive trauma, methodical application of pain, death delayed for maximum suffering. Someone had wanted information. Someone had wanted Jason to hurt before he died. But it was the witness statement that stopped Marcus's breathing. A Packless female had heard Jason's final words, recorded them with the kind of desperate precision that came from knowing nobody would care unless there was proof. Marcus read the transcript once, twice, a third time, as his pulse accelerated and old memories clawed their way to the surface. Tell Stone, tell the AlphaKing I kept his secret. Tell him he still owes the debt. The room tilted. Marcus gripped the desk, edged knuckles white against dark wood, as his mind dragged him back 15 years to the mountains of Afghanistan, where the air tasted like dust and cordite and fear. He'd been a lieutenant colonel, then leading a Marine unit through hostile territory, young and arrogant, and convinced his tactical brilliance made him invincible. The ambush had proved him wrong. Enemy fire from 3 positions, his unit pinned in a valley with no cover and dwindling ammunition. Marcus had made the calculations. They had maybe 10 minutes before everyone died. He'd been preparing to order a suicide charge, the kind of desperate move that looked heroic in retrospect, but felt like failure in the moment when a single Marine sergeant had materialized from nowhere. The man had moved like violence incarnate, charging the nearest enemy position alone, while Marcus's radio operator screamed for him to stand down. But the sergeant hadn't worn a comm unit, hadn't responded to orders, had simply kept moving forward with his rifle and a combat knife, and the kind of reckless courage that either won medals or got you killed. He'd taken out the first position, then the second. By the time he reached the third, Marcus's unit had rallied, flanking the remaining hostiles and turning the ambush into a rout. They'd won. Everyone in Marcus's unit had survived. The sergeant had vanished before Marcus could get his name. He'd searched afterward, filed requests through channels, tried to find the Marine who'd saved 15 lives without waiting for orders or backup or any reasonable chance of survival. But the chaos of war had swallowed the man's identity, and eventually Marcus had moved on to other battles, other responsibilities, the debt unpaid and festering in the back of his mind like an old wound that never quite healed. Now Jason Reeves lay on a morgue slab, and Marcus understood with absolute certainty that the unnamed sergeant had been Jason's brother. The debt wasn't just unpaid, it had compounded with interest, and the bill had come due in blood. His phone buzzed. Garrett Cross, his head of security, and the closest thing Marcus had to a friend after 15 years of watching each other's backs across 2 wars and 5 years of political knife fighting. The voice that came through was pure professional concern, wrapped around an undercurrent of worry that Garrett would never admit to feeling. "Sir, you need to see the full forensics report. There's more." Marcus was already moving toward the war room, the autopsy photos clutched in one hand. The palace hallways were empty at this hour, his footsteps echoing off marble floors that had cost more than most wolves earned in a lifetime. He'd never wanted this place, this throne, this endless parade of political theater and calculated smiles. But his father's assassination 5 years ago had left him no choice, and duty had always mattered more than happiness in the Stone family. The war room occupied the palace's former command center, a Cold War relic converted into the nerve center of his territory's security apparatus. Screens covered one wall displaying real-time feeds from 5-pack territories, border sensors, and encrypted communications channels. Garrett stood at the central console, his posture military perfect, despite the early hour dark hair showing more gray than the last time Marcus had looked closely. They were getting old, 42 felt ancient some days. Garrett pulled up additional files without preamble. Jason Reeves wasn't just tortured for information. The pattern suggests professional interrogation, the kind military intelligence uses. Whoever did this had training. Marcus studied the forensics images, his mind automatically cataloging details, the way 20 years of combat operations had taught him to see violence as data. Precise cuts, controlled application of pain. No rage, no passion, just methodical extraction of information, followed by execution when the subject had nothing left to give. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. They thought he knew something worth killing for. Garrett nodded, pulling up another file. Jason had been investigating medical supply corruption for 8 months. Packless clinics across all 5 territories reporting shortages, while inventory logs show full stock. Someone stealing supplies and selling them on the black market. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Medical theft hit him in a place deeper than professional obligation. His mate Sarah had died 8 years ago from complications during pregnancy, complications that could have been managed with proper medical care if the field hospital hadn't been undersupplied due to some administrative fuck-up that nobody had ever adequately explained. He'd buried his mate and his unborn son in the same grave while his wolf howled with grief and rage, and he'd sworn then that supply chain failures would never kill another wolf under his protection. Now someone was deliberately creating those failures. For profit. The thought made his wolf press against his skin, wanting blood. Who was Jason working with? Garrett's expression shifted into something Marcus recognized as tactical concern. A private investigator named Elena Reeves, former Army military intelligence, 12 years active duty, specialized in counterintelligence and interrogation psychology. Honorable discharge 2 years ago, details classified. She's been operating independently since then, mostly packless rights cases. Marcus processed that. Military intelligence meant serious training, the kind that produced operators who could disappear into civilian life and still carry enough skills to be dangerous. She's Jason's sister. That's the working theory. Jason used his brother's saved pay to put her through college. Then she joined the Army. They stayed close despite the distance. Then she's next on the kill list. Garrett's silence confirmed it. Marcus made the decision in 2 seconds flat. Find her, bring her in voluntarily if possible. I'll go personally. Sir, that's not protocol. You're the AlphaKing. You don't conduct field operations for her. For what a dead Marine's sister. Marcus heard his voice drop into the register. That made subordinates remember he'd earned his rank in combat, not politics. That Marine's brother saved 15 lives, including mine. I owe him, which means I owe her protection, whether she wants it or not. Garrett studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll assemble a security team. 4 operators, light footprint. We leave in 30 minutes. Marcus was already heading for his armory. He dressed in tactical clothing that felt more natural than the suits politicians expected him to wear, loaded weapons, with the muscle memory of thousands of training drills, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, purpose beyond duty. Sarah's death had hollowed him out, left him going through the motions of leadership without the spark that made it meaningful. The throne was responsibility and burden, and endless political games with wolves who saw him as a prize or a threat, but rarely as a person. He'd accepted that isolation as the price of power, built walls around the parts of himself that still felt anything beyond professional obligation. But a blood debt was simple, pure. A debt could be paid. Garrett's team assembled in the underground garage, 4 ex-military operators Marcus recognized from previous operations, all of them with the kind of cold competence that came from surviving situations where incompetence got you killed. They loaded into 2 unmarked vehicles, no pack insignia, nothing to identify them as royal security. The drive to Portland took 3 hours through darkness, broken only by highway lights and the occasional passing semi-truck. Marcus used the time to review everything Garrett had compiled on Elena Reeves, building a psychological profile the way he'd been trained to assess assets and threats. 32 years old, though the military ID photo showed eyes older than that. Blonde hair pulled back in regulation-style features, attractive in a severe way that suggested she didn't give a damn about looking approachable. Combat infantry badge expert marksman qualification, multiple commendations for intelligence work that the Army had redacted to the point of uselessness. Whatever she'd done during 12 years of service, it had been classified enough that even an Alpha King's security clearance couldn't access the details. The discharge papers told a more interesting story. Honorable, but the circumstances were listed as medical psychological, which usually meant someone had seen too much done, too much, or both. The Army took care of its own when they broke, gave them disability payments and thank you for your service plaques, and quietly encouraged them to disappear into civilian life before their trauma became someone else's problem. Marcus knew that particular failure intimately. He'd signed enough discharge papers during his military career, watched enough good soldiers walk away with haunted eyes and forced smiles. Elena Reeves had vanished into the Packless community 2 years ago and started taking investigative cases. Nobody else wanted domestic abuse among Omega's medical neglect territory disputes where Packless wolves got crushed between pack politics. The kind of work that paid shit and made enemies, but apparently mattered enough to her that she kept doing it anyway. Jason had hired her 6 months before his death. The case files Garrett had recovered showed methodical investigation, the kind of detailed evidence gathering that took patience and tactical thinking. Financial records, shipping manifests, witness interviews, all organized with military precision. Elena Reeves knew how to build a case that would stand up in court or get someone killed depending on which outcome became necessary. She'd been hunting the same medical supply corruption that got her client murdered, which meant she either had Jason's final evidence or knew where to find it, and the people who'd killed Jason would come for her next. Portland's Packless community occupied the industrial district where abandoned warehouses had been converted into makeshift housing, the kind of neighborhood where official pack territory ended and nobody important paid attention. Marcus's wolf tensed as they entered the area, instincts reading threat in the shadowed alleys and broken streetlights. This was exactly the kind of place where packless wolves survived in the cracks of a system that never quite acknowledged they existed. His father would have called it a blight. Marcus called it a failure of governance. Garrett navigated to an address that looked like every other converted warehouse, 3 stories of industrial brick windows, covered with metal grates, a single reinforced door marked only by a faded number. Intel suggested Elena lived and worked here, one of those operators who didn't separate professional and personal space because that separation implied you had a life worth protecting beyond the mission. Marcus recognized the mindset. He'd lived in his office for the first 2 years after Sarah's death. They parked half a block away. Garrett's team split into tactical positions, 2 covering the rear exit, 2 flanking the main approach. Marcus moved forward with Garrett, his wolf tracking every shadow and scent, looking for the ambush his instincts insisted was coming. He knocked. Polite professional, the kind of knock that said official business rather than threat. Nothing. Garrett checked thermal imaging on his tactical tablet, frowned, someone's inside. 2nd floor. No movement for the past 3 minutes. Every combat instinct Marcus had started screaming. Nobody stayed that still for that long, unless they were dead unconscious or waiting to spring a trap. He reached for the door handle just as his wolf caught a scent from above: gun oil, tension sweat, and the particular chemical signature of someone whose adrenaline had been spiking for hours. Marcus moved on pure instinct, yanking Garrett sideways as the door exploded inward. The flashbang detonated in the space where they'd been standing, white light and concussive force, turning the world into temporary chaos. Marcus's enhanced hearing would be compromised for a few seconds, but his training kicked in, automatically assess, orient, respond. The blast had been precisely placed to disorient without causing permanent damage, which meant whoever said it wanted them alive for questioning or wanted them gone without corpses that would trigger investigations. Professional. Tactical. Someone with serious training. Garrett was already recovering, signaling the team to hold position. Marcus's vision cleared just in time to see movement on the roof, a figure dropping down with the kind of controlled precision that spoke to extensive military experience. Elena Reeves hit the ground in a tactical crouch, took down the first security operator with a precision strike to the nerve cluster below his ear, had the second in a joint lock before Marcus's wolf could process the threat. She moved like controlled violence, every motion economical, and practiced the kind of operator who'd spent years learning exactly how much force was required to neutralize threats without killing them. Garrett drew his sidearm, but Elena was already there, one hand locked around his throat, blade pressed to his carotid artery gun, aimed at Marcus's center mass with her other hand. The entire sequence had taken maybe 4 seconds. Marcus felt his wolf respond to the threat power flooding his system, but he kept it leashed. This wasn't an enemy. This was an operator protecting herself with deadly competence, and killing her would accomplish nothing except violating the debt he owed her family. Their eyes met. Hers were blue-gray, cold as winter ice, and absolutely devoid of fear. Whatever she'd seen during 12 years of military service had burned away the instinct to panic when holding a knife to a powerful Alpha's security chief. Her voice came out flat professional, the kind of tone that meant business. "You have 10 seconds to explain why the AlphaKing is raiding my safe house before I kill your man." Marcus kept his hands visible body language, non-threatening despite every instinct screaming to respond to the challenge. "We're not raiding. I'm here about Jason Reeves." He watched her micro-reactions with the attention to detail that had kept him alive through 2 decades of combat. The knife hand trembled just slightly. Pain flashed through her eyes there and gone in a heartbeat. Grief, rage, and something darker that looked like guilt. She'd cared about Jason, maybe more than a professional relationship would explain. Marcus kept his voice level, letting the truth carry its own weight. "I know you worked together. I know he was murdered. And I know whoever killed him is coming for you next." The standoff stretched. Elena's tactical mind was clearly running. Calculations, were they telling the truth? Was this a trap? Could she escape if this went wrong? How many guards were positioned outside her detection range? Marcus watched her reach the same conclusions he would have in her position, fighting her way out of a situation involving the AlphaKing's personal security team was a suicide run, and if they'd wanted her dead, they would have opened with lethal force instead of a polite knock. She lowered the knife fractionally, didn't release Garrett, didn't holster her weapon, but acknowledged the possibility of dialogue. Jason was investigating medical supply theft. He found something 3 days before he died, called to tell me he had proof, never made it to the meeting. Marcus nodded slowly. "I know. I want to find who killed him, but I need your help." Why would an AlphaKing care about a dead Packless investigator? The question hit deeper than she probably intended. Marcus felt the weight of unpaid debts, unspoken promises, the Marine whose name he'd never learned. Because 15 years ago, Jason's brother saved my life and 14 others. I never got the chance to thank him. Never even learned his name. Jason's death means I owe a blood debt I can't repay. The least I can do is make sure his sister doesn't join him. Something flickered across Elena's expression, recognition maybe, or understanding. Whatever Jason had told her about his brother's military service, she knew the story Marcus was referencing. Before she could respond, sniper fire punched through the warehouse windows. Marcus's wolf reacted before his conscious mind processed the threat power flooding his system as he shifted into combat mode. Garrett twisted in Elena's grip, years of partnership making him trust that Marcus would handle the external threat while he managed the immediate tactical situation. The security team returned fire, precise 3-round bursts designed to suppress rather than expose their positions. Elena released Garrett instantly, all pretense of conflict abandoned, as she assessed the new threat with professional calm. 6 shooters, military-grade weapons, coordinated assault pattern. They followed you here. Marcus was already moving toward cover, his tactical mind cataloging details. You have an exit strategy. Basement tunnel. Cold War construction leads to the parking garage 3 blocks east. But it's trapped. We clear the traps or die here. Marcus met her eyes. Choose. For one heartbeat, Elena studied him with the kind of assessment that separated good operators from dead ones. Then she holstered her weapon and moved toward the basement access. Follow me, touch nothing, step exactly where I step, and if any of your men trigger a device, we leave them behind. Garrett signaled the team, 2 wounded but mobile, covering fire, holding the attackers at bay. No time for anything except the immediate tactical retreat Elena was offering. They followed her through the warehouse's ground floor, past makeshift living quarters that spoke to a life stripped down to mission essentials, into a basement that smelled of concrete and old fear. Elena moved through the darkness with the confidence of someone who'd mapped every inch of her territory. She disarmed pressure plates with practiced efficiency, used a UV flashlight to mark tripwires for the team to avoid bypassed motion sensors, with the kind of technical knowledge that confirmed her intelligence background. The tunnel stretched ahead like a concrete throat, ancient ventilation systems creating air currents that carried the scent of rust and abandonment. Behind them, explosions rocked the warehouse. The attackers were breaching with overwhelming force, the kind of assault that suggested military contractors with unlimited budget and no concern for collateral damage. Marcus's wolf wanted to turn and fight to make them pay for the violation of bringing violence into his territory without permission. But tactical thinking overrode animal instinct. 6 trained shooters with superior firepower and prepared positions would turn a stand-up fight into a slaughter. Better to retreat, regroup, and hunt them on ground of his choosing. They emerged in a parking garage that looked abandoned, concrete pillars supporting a structure that had been condemned years ago but never demolished. Elena's tactical planning impressed Marcus more than he'd admit. She'd prepared multiple exit routes. Cash supplies turned her safe house into a proper defensive position, with contingencies for different threat scenarios. Professional paranoia kept operators alive. Garrett's team secured the perimeter while Marcus assessed their tactical situation. 2 guards wounded, nothing life-threatening but enough to slow them down. 6 attackers, maybe more, with coordination that suggested professional military training. And Elena Reeves standing in the middle of it all, looking at Marcus with ice-blue eyes that demanded answers. Her voice cut through the tactical chatter. 2 options, run or hunt. Marcus felt his wolf respond to the challenge in her tone, the assumption that he might be the kind of alpha who chose safety over confrontation. They killed your partner. They're hunting you. What do you want? The mask dropped for just a second, revealing raw fury beneath the professional calm. I want to know who sent them. Then we take one alive. Marcus signaled Garrett, split them up, force them into pursuit positions. We ambush the trailing element. Garrett grinned, the expression predatory, like Kandahar. Exactly like Kandahar. Elena's expression shifted from suspicion to something that might have been respect. You're going to counter-ambush a professional hit team with wounded personnel and no terrain advantage. Marcus met her eyes. You have a better idea. She studied him for another moment, then holstered her sidearm and drew a combat knife. I know these streets. I know which alleys have dead ends, which buildings have roof access where the sight lines break. You want to hunt them, fine, but we do it my way. The tactical partnership formed without discussion, 2 military-trained operators recognizing competence in each other and setting aside everything else in favor of mission completion. Elena took point, leading them through the industrial district's maze of buildings and alleys with the confidence of someone who'd mapped every tactical advantage years ago. Garrett coordinated the team, spacing them for maximum coverage while minimizing exposure. Marcus watched Elena work and understood why Jason had hired her. This wasn't just a private investigator taking cases for money. This was an operator still fighting the same war she'd fought during 12 years of military service, just with different enemies and no official sanction. They set the ambush in an alley between 2 warehouses, positions carefully chosen to create a kill box with controlled firing lanes and no escape routes. Elena crouched on a fire escape above, knife in hand, while Marcus and Garrett flanked the alley entrance. The 2 wounded guards stayed back in reserve, covering their rear in case this went sideways. The wait stretched seconds, feeling like hours, as Marcus's enhanced hearing tracked the pursuit team. 4 sets of footsteps, moving with tactical discipline, but too aggressive to be cautious. They thought they were hunting, not realizing the roles had reversed. The first shooter entered the alley. Marcus waited, let him advance patient, the way 20 years of combat operations had taught him. The second followed, then the third and fourth, exactly as predicted, because professional soldiers relied on training, and training made you predictable if your opponent understood your doctrine. Elena dropped from above, landing on the trailing shooter with brutal efficiency. Her blade found the nerve cluster at the base of his skull, precise strike that would paralyze without killing if she'd calculated the depth correctly. The man went down without a sound. Marcus and Garrett moved simultaneously, closing the trap. Suppressed weapons made quiet coughing sounds as they took down the next 2 shooters with precision that came from years of operating together. The fourth tried to run, made it maybe 3 steps before Elena materialized in front of him, sweeping his legs and putting him face first into concrete. 30 seconds. 4 hostiles neutralized, 1 captured for interrogation, 0 friendly casualties beyond the wounds they'd already sustained. They zip-tied the prisoners and dragged the conscious one into a nearby loading dock. Garrett swept for tracking devices, found 3, disabled them, with electromagnetic pulses that would make their handlers think the team had been killed in the warehouse collapse. Marcus crouched in front of the captured shooter, studying him with the cold assessment of someone who'd conducted dozens of hostile interrogations. Russian accent based on the brief curses during capture, military bearing, despite civilian clothing, the kind of dead eyes that came from years of killing for money rather than conviction. A contractor, professional, expensive, utterly without loyalty beyond his paycheck. Marcus kept his voice conversational, almost friendly. You're going to tell me who hired you. You're going to tell me why. And you're going to do it in the next 5 minutes, or I let her ask the questions. He gestured to Elena, who was cleaning her knife with the kind of methodical attention that suggested she'd spent considerable time learning exactly how much pain a blade could inflict without causing death. The shooter looked between them, calculating odds, weighing loyalty against survival. Marcus watched the moment he made his choice, the subtle relaxation that meant capitulation. But Elena moved first. She crouched next to the shooter, knife point resting against his femoral artery, and her voice dropped into a register Marcus recognized from his own interrogation training, absolute conviction that she would follow through on any threat. Torture doesn't work. Studies prove it. People say anything to make pain stop, truth or lies, whatever they think you want to hear. But I know 47 ways to make you want to talk. Ways that don't involve pain at all. Just psychological pressure. The right questions in the right order and time. The shooter's eyes widened fractionally. Elena continued, her tone never changing from that flat professional calm. I know you're Russian military, probably Spetsnaz, based on your movement patterns. I know you've been trained to resist interrogation, that you've got protocols for capture that involve feeding false information until extraction or execution. I know all of that because I wrote some of those protocols. She let that sink in, watched his micro-expression shift from calculation to the first edge of fear. But here's what you don't know. I've been hunting the people who killed my partner for 2 years. I've got nothing left to lose, no career to protect, no reputation that matters. And right now, you're the first real lead I've had in 6 months. So you're going to tell me everything. Not because I'll hurt you, but because I'll make you understand on a psychological level that talking is the only way you walk out of this alive. She spent the next 8 minutes dismantling him. Marcus watched impressed despite himself as Elena used textbook interrogation, psychology building rapport, creating cognitive dissonance, offering face-saving exits, applying pressure at exactly the right points. No physical coercion, no threats beyond the implicit understanding that cooperation meant survival. The shooter broke, told them everything in a rush of Russian-accented confession, hired by an intermediary whose identity he didn't know. Payment in cryptocurrency, contract terms, simple, kill anyone investigating, Clearwater medical supply, theft bonus payment for eliminating the AlphaKing if opportunity arose. Jason Reeves had been target 1. Elena was target 2. Marcus had been a surprise bonus that would have doubled their fee. Garrett recorded everything, already running traces on the cryptocurrency wallet and the contact protocols. Marcus studied the shooter's face, memorizing details, then made the cold calculation that separated AlphaKings from ordinary wolves. He couldn't let them go. They'd report back, reveal that the ambush had failed, trigger whatever contingency plans their employers had prepared. But killing contractors without trial would violate his own laws about due process and rule of law. Elena solved the problem with brutal efficiency. Knock them out. We've got holding cells at the Packless Community Center, reinforced and off any official records. We stash them there, continue the investigation, deal with them later when we're not being actively hunted. Marcus nodded. Pragmatic solution, morally gray enough to make him uncomfortable, but tactically sound. Garrett administered sedatives that would keep the contractors unconscious for hours, and they loaded the bodies into Marcus's vehicles like cargo. The drive back through Portland felt surreal. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed too beautiful for a morning that had started with explosions and ended with interrogation. Marcus sat in the back seat next to Elena, both of them silent as adrenaline slowly drained away and left exhaustion in its wake. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice stripped of professional detachment. Why did you really come? The blood debt story plays well, but AlphaKings don't conduct field operations for dead, Packless investigators. What's your angle? Marcus considered lying, defaulting to political calculation, maintaining the walls he'd built around anything resembling genuine motivation. But something about her absolute honesty during the interrogation, her willingness to strip away pretense in favor of effectiveness, made him match her candor. My mate died 8 years ago, pregnant, complications that should have been manageable, except the field hospital was undersupplied due to administrative failures nobody wanted to explain. I buried her and our son because someone decided supply chain efficiency mattered less than cost reduction. He paused, feeling the old wound open. Jason was investigating the same kind of theft. Medical supplies stolen, sold for profit, while packless clinics go without and people die from preventable causes. You're right that Alpha Kings don't normally conduct field operations. But I'm not here as an Alpha King. I'm here as someone who understands what it means to lose people to systemic failure. Elena studied him with those winter ice eyes, assessments shifting into something that might have been understanding. Jason spent 8 months tracking the theft. He compiled evidence that would have brought down whoever was running the operation: names, dates, financial trails, everything needed for prosecution. He called me 3 days before he died, said he'd found the proof, the specific identity of who was coordinating everything from the top. The proof still exists. He used dead drops, old-school tradecraft, the kind intelligence agencies taught before everything went digital. Physical documents hidden in multiple locations with encrypted maps showing where to find them. I've been searching for 6 weeks, found 2 of the drops already, but the final cache, the one with the names, is still out there. Marcus processed that tactical mind, already forming plans. You'll never find it while running from professional contractors. You need protection, resources, time to conduct a proper search. And you're offering what's sanctuary in your palace, where everyone will see me as a weakness to exploit. No thanks. I'm offering a tactical partnership. You have investigative skills and knowledge of Jason's methods. I have resources, authority, and the ability to shield you from immediate threats. We work together, find the evidence, expose whoever is running this corruption. Then we both get what we want. You get justice for Jason. I get the satisfaction of knowing medical theft ends with arrests instead of continuing under new management. Elena's expression remained skeptical. And after, when the investigation ends and you don't need my skills anymore? What happens to the packless investigator who knows too many royal secrets? The question revealed her real fear, not death in combat, but betrayal after trust. Someone had damaged her badly enough that cooperation felt more dangerous than isolation. Marcus held her gaze, letting her see truth without performance. After you walk away clean, no obligations, no strings, no debt beyond what we've already incurred working together. I don't collect assets, Elena. I pay debts and honor agreements. You help me find Jason's killers. I make sure you survive long enough to see them prosecuted. That's the deal. She studied him for a long moment. Whatever she'd learned during 12 years of intelligence work, apparently finding something trustworthy in his face. One condition: when we find them, when we have evidence and trials and all the official processes you alpha types love, I want to be in the room. I want them to see my face and know Jason's death wasn't just an inconvenient loose end they cleaned up. I want that moment. Agreed. They shook hands, the gesture formal but carrying weight. Marcus felt his wolf settle, satisfied that the tactical alliance was honest, even if complicated. Elena's mask didn't drop entirely, but some of the razor-edge wariness softened into professional acceptance. Garrett drove them to the royal compound while calling ahead to arrange security protocols. Marcus watched Elena's reaction as they approached the massive estate, former military installation, converted into a government center, all reinforced walls and strategic sight lines, and enough firepower positioned throughout to repel a small army. She assessed it with professional appreciation. Paranoid much? I've survived 3 assassination attempts in 5 years. Paranoia keeps me breathing. The palace interior was elegant but functional, a careful balance between displaying power and maintaining tactical readiness. Marcus led Elena through hallways where guards stood at precise intervals, their presence obvious enough to reassure, but subtle enough to avoid feeling oppressive. His office occupied the strategic center of the complex, windows bulletproof and walls reinforced security systems monitoring everything. Elena studied the space with the same tactical assessment she'd applied to their escape route. You live here. I work here. Living implies time for anything beyond operational planning. Something flickered across her face, recognition, maybe empathy. She understood the trap of letting mission consume everything until personal life became a distant concept you barely remembered. Garrett entered without knocking, his informality, speaking to years of partnership. Sir, we've got a problem. Someone just issued a kill order on Elena through official PAC security channels. Marcus felt his wolf surge. That's impossible. Only council members can issue authorized terminations. It's coming from Alpha Christine Mallory's authorization codes. Direct order classified as national security priority, shoot on sight for Elena Reeves. The implications hit like a physical blow. Christine Mallory was second most powerful member of his ruling council, a political mastermind who'd built her reputation on progressive reform and packless rights advocacy. If she was involved in medical supply theft, if she'd ordered Jason's execution, Elena's voice cut through his tactical analysis, flat and deadly. Then this goes higher than we thought. Marcus studied the authorization displayed on Garrett's tablet and his mind cataloging inconsistencies. Christine was brilliant, but rarely direct. Issuing a kill order through official channels would create records evidence, the kind of paper trail that would destroy her politically if exposed. Either she'd gotten desperate or it's a frame, Elena said, reaching the same conclusion Marcus was approaching. Someone with access to her codes trying to make her look guilty. Divide the council, make you suspect your own advisors while the real architect operates freely. Garrett nodded. Classic counterintelligence tactic. Create enough confusion that nobody knows who to trust. Marcus made the decision that would either solve everything or destroy what remained of PAC stability. Elena, I need you to come with me to tomorrow's council security review. Official capacity as my new security consultant. We observe Christine's reactions, assess other council members, look for inconsistencies. You want me to walk into a room full of the most powerful alphas in 5 territories, any of whom might be trying to kill me, and just observe them. I want you to do what you do best, analyze threats, identify deception, use those intelligence skills to help me separate actual conspirators from innocent parties being framed. Can you do that? Elena considered, tactical mind clearly running, probability calculations. What's my cover story? Truth mostly. Former Army MI hired to audit palace security after recent infiltration attempts. You'll have access to everything, full clearance protection of royal authority. Anyone who wants to eliminate you will have to do it publicly, which limits their options. Or makes me a target the moment I step outside protected areas. Then we don't give you opportunities to step outside protected areas. You're under my protection, which means anyone who touches you is declaring war on me personally. Most wolves aren't that stupid. Most, Elena repeated the word heavy with skepticism. Marcus met her eyes. The alternative is continuing to run while professional contractors hunt you through cities where you have no resources, no backup, and no allies. At least here, you're surrounded by guards who are very good at their jobs and motivated to keep you breathing. The logic landed. Elena's shoulders relaxed fractionally, acceptance mixing with resignation. Fine, I'll play security consultant and bait simultaneously. But Marcus, she used his name, deliberately stripping away formal titles. If this goes wrong, if more people die because we're using me as bait to expose corruption, that's on both of us. Agreed. He felt the weight of that shared responsibility, the recognition that they were committing to something that might cost lives, including their own. Garrett set up secure quarters, full security protocol. Protocols, discreet guards, everything she needs. Garrett nodded and left. Marcus turned back to Elena, seeing exhaustion finally showing through her tactical armor. You should rest. We've got 6 hours before the council meeting, and you're going to need every advantage. I don't sleep well in unfamiliar places. Neither do I. Welcome to the club. He gestured toward the door. But you should try anyway. You're no good to anyone if exhaustion compromises your judgment. Elena hesitated at the threshold, something shifting in her expression. Jason talked about his brother. The Marine who saved your unit, he was proud of him. Said his brother believed in something bigger than himself, believed service mattered, even when it cost everything. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I wish I could have told him thank you. He would have said you were welcome. Then he would have bought you a beer and told terrible jokes until you forgot why you felt guilty about being alive. Elena's voice carried grief wrapped around fondness. He was like that, made everyone around him feel lighter. I'm sorry I couldn't protect him. You didn't know him, didn't even know he existed until 3 days ago. You're not responsible for his death. She met his eyes, but I appreciate that you care enough to try to make it right anyway. She left before Marcus could respond. He stood alone in his office, surrounded by maps and security feeds and all the apparatus of power, and felt the weight of unpaid debts pressing down like physical force. Garrett returned 20 minutes later. She settled, refused guards inside her quarters but accepted perimeter security, spent 15 minutes checking every entry point before she'd even sit down. Good operational security. Professional paranoia, Garrett corrected. She's been burned before. Badly. Marcus nodded, unsurprised. You didn't develop Elena's level of tactical wariness without learning the hard way that trust could get you killed. He spent the remaining hours before dawn reviewing council files, building profiles on members who might be involved in medical supply corruption. Christine Mallory was the obvious suspect given the kill order issued through her codes, but everything else about her records suggested she'd built a career on actually helping packless wolves, rather than exploiting them. Either she was a better actor than Marcus had ever suspected, or someone was very carefully framing her. Garrett Stone, no relation, despite sharing Marcus's surname, controlled Eastern Ridge Territory, one of the wealthiest regions due to his family's industrial holdings. Traditional to the point of being reactionary, openly skeptical of packless rights reforms, but also operating with a code of honor that made him predictable. If Garrett was stealing medical supplies, he'd have to overcome deeply ingrained beliefs about nobility and proper conduct. Kira Walsh ran Western Coastal Territory through economic dominance, her shipping empire controlling most maritime trade. Neutral politically, always calculating advantage, the kind of wolf who'd sell weapons to both sides of a war if it improved her profit margins. She had the means and opportunity to redirect medical supplies through her shipping network. Devon Cross commanded Southern Border Territory with military efficiency learned through 20 years in Delta Force. He'd served with Marcus during the early years in Afghanistan, earned Marcus's respect through competence and integrity under fire. But war changed people. Marcus had seen enough to know that good soldiers sometimes became something darker when civilian life didn't offer the same clarity of purpose. Any of them could be guilty. All of them had alibis, resources, and political sophistication to avoid obvious mistakes. Somewhere in the data Garrett had compiled was the pattern that would reveal truth, but Marcus's exhausted brain couldn't process it clearly. He dozed at his desk, half sleeping, the way combat veterans learn to rest without ever truly lowering their guard. Dreams flickered through Sarah's face, the Marine sergeant charging enemy positions, Jason Reeves dying alone in neutral territory, Elena's winter ice eyes demanding truth. Garrett woke him at 0600. Council meeting in 3 hours. Elena's awake, already reviewing security protocols like she's memorizing the entire compound layout. Marcus straightened, ignoring the protest from muscles too old to sleep in desk chairs. She probably is. Intelligence operators never stop gathering information. He showered, dressed in formal attire that felt like armor, and went to collect Elena. She'd been provided appropriate clothing, professional, without being decorative, tactical enough to move in, but formal enough to satisfy council protocols. Her blonde hair was pulled back severe, and neat makeup minimal the overall effect, creating an impression of cold competence rather than traditional feminine beauty. She studied him with equal assessment. You clean up well, almost look civilized. Don't let it fool you. Underneath this suit, I'm still the Marine who's killed people in 17 different countries. Good. I'd hate to think I was trusting a politician. They arrived at the council chamber together, Marcus's presence ensuring that every guard and functionary they passed understood Elena was under royal protection. The chamber itself was built to intimidate: high ceilings, vaulted overhead, massive tables surrounded by chairs for 12 Alpha's walls, covered in carved pack symbols representing centuries of tradition. Council members were already assembling. Christine Mallory arrived first, elegant as always, her expression carefully neutral as she registered Elena's presence. Garrett Stone followed his disapproval, obvious, despite professional courtesy. Devon Cross entered with military bearing, eyes assessing the room automatically. Kira Walsh glided in like she owned the space calculating advantage before she'd even sat down. Others filed in regional Alpha senior advisors, the apparatus of pack governance that Marcus had inherited and modified but never quite trusted. Too many of them saw him as temporary a wartime leader who'd outlived his usefulness now that threats had shifted from external military action to internal political maneuvering. Marcus took his position at the table's head, Elena standing slightly behind and to his right in the formal position of security consultant. He watched council members react to her presence. Surprise calculation, a few flickers of recognition from those who'd reviewed her service record. He kept his voice formal, establishing authority before anyone could object. Before we begin standard agenda items, I'm introducing our new security consultant, Elena Reeves, former Army military intelligence, 12 years active service, specialized in counterintelligence operations. She'll be conducting a comprehensive security audit following recent infiltration attempts. Christine spoke first, her tone perfectly calibrated between welcome and subtle challenge. How thorough. Though I'm surprised you didn't consult the council before bringing in outside contractors. Elena's response came before Marcus could speak, her voice carrying the flat authority of someone who gave zero fucks about political niceties. Alpha Stone doesn't require council approval for security decisions. That's in your own charter section, 7 paragraph 3. The room temperature dropped several degrees. Nobody spoke to council members that way, except other council members, and even then only when protected by political authority or suicidal courage. Devin Cross broke the tension with something that might have been approval. Direct, I appreciate that. What was your MOS 35L, counterintelligence special agent? Where'd you serve? Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. 12 years forward deployed. Devin nodded respect, replacing skepticism. Welcome aboard. Anyone with that much time in those hellholes knows what actual threats look like versus political theater. Marcus watched Elena's micro-expressions. She hadn't expected support from Devin, was recalculating her threat assessment based on new information. Good. He wanted her off balance enough to stay alert, but not so threatened she'd default to viewing everyone as hostile. The meeting progressed through standard agenda items, territory disputes, budget allocations, trade agreements between packs. Marcus divided his attention between official business and observing how council members reacted to Elena's presence. Christine watched her with the kind of analytical focus that suggested genuine concern rather than guilt. Garrett Stone looked uncomfortable but not threatened. Kira Walsh's expression remained neutral, giving away nothing. Devin Cross treated Elena like he'd treat any military professional with the baseline respect earned through service. Nobody looked guilty. But then anyone sophisticated enough to orchestrate Jason's murder would be sophisticated enough to control their reactions during a council meeting. The meeting finally ended. Council members dispersed, most ignoring Elena entirely now that initial curiosity had faded. Christine approached Marcus directly, her voice low enough that only he and Elena could hear. A word in private about the security consultant. Marcus nodded, leading them to an adjacent chamber used for confidential discussions. Christine closed the door, then turned to Elena with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. I know why you're really here, and I'm not involved in whatever got Jason Reeves killed. Elena's mask didn't crack. Funny, the kill order issued through your authorization code suggests otherwise. Someone is framing me, using my credentials to issue orders I'd never approve. Christine met Marcus's eyes. I've been investigating the medical supply theft for 18 months. Jason Reeves was one of my informants, though he didn't know I was the one funding his investigation. I kept it quiet because I didn't know who on the council was dirty. Marcus felt his tactical assessment shift. You knew about the corruption and didn't tell me. I had suspicions, not proof. Going to you without evidence would have tipped off whoever was running the operation. So I funded independent investigators, built my case carefully, waited for the moment when I'd have enough to force prosecutions. Her expression tightened with something that looked like genuine grief. Jason died before he could deliver the final evidence, the proof that would identify the mastermind. Elena studied Christine with the cold assessment of someone trained to detect deception. Prove you're telling the truth. Show me your investigative files, your communications with Jason, everything. In exchange for what? Information. Jason used dead drops to hide evidence. I've found 2 of 3 caches. The final one, the one with names, is still missing. If you really were working with him, you might know where it is. Christine considered, then pulled out a tablet and began transferring encrypted files. I'll give you everything, but you need to understand something. Whoever is running this operation has resources that terrify me. They've got military contractors on payroll, access to official security systems, and enough political influence to frame council members convincingly. Finding them might get all of us killed. Marcus watched the file transfer complete, his mind already processing implications. Then we'd better find them first. The war room felt smaller than it had any right to be, considering it occupied 1,500 square feet of reinforced concrete and bulletproof glass. Marcus stood at the central console, watching security feeds flicker across a dozen screens, while his wolf paced restlessly beneath his skin, demanding action when all they had was waiting and analysis. 3 days since the council meeting. 3 days of Elena going through Christine's files with the methodical precision of someone who'd spent 12 years learning exactly how intelligence operations fell apart. 3 days of finding nothing except confirmation that Christine Mallory had indeed been investigating the same corruption that got Jason killed, which meant someone else was dirty, someone smart enough to frame Christine while staying invisible. Elena worked at a side table, papers spread in organized chaos that somehow made sense to her trained mind. She'd barely slept since moving into the palace, running on coffee and what Marcus suspected was old military conditioning that treated rest as a luxury rather than necessity. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her focus remained sharp, blue-gray gaze, tracking patterns across financial records and shipping manifests. Garrett entered carrying fresh coffee and news that wouldn't improve anyone's mood. Just got intel from our field teams. Another packless wolf murdered. Same MO as Jason, professional torture execution after interrogation. Victim's name was Iris Chen. Elena's head snapped up, face draining of color so fast Marcus thought she might collapse. The papers in her hand fluttered to the table as her entire body went rigid. Iris Chen from Northern Crescent Pack. Garrett checked his tablet, expression carefully neutral, in that way that meant he'd already connected dots Elena was still processing. Yes, 28 years old, worked as a medical administrator, no criminal record. Found in her apartment 6 hours ago, responding officers discovered a note. He didn't need to say what the note contained. Marcus could see it in Elena's eyes, the exact moment professional detachment shattered and left raw grief in its place. Elena's voice came out barely above whisper, "Show me." Garrett hesitated, looking to Marcus for confirmation. Marcus nodded. Some wounds needed to be seen to be believed, even when belief came with the kind of pain that broke people. The crime scene photos were brutal. Iris Chen had died hard torture, methodical, and designed to extract maximum information before the merciful release of death. The note left on her body was brief, typed rather than handwritten. Elena Reeves, stop investigating, or more die. Marcus watched emotions flicker across Elena's face, grief, rage, guilt, and beneath it all, something darker that looked like the kind of fury that turned operators into killers. She stood perfectly still for 30 seconds, processing trauma, the way combat veterans learn to compartmentalize until the mission was over and breaking down became tactically feasible. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Marcus moved to intercept. "Where are you going?" "To find everyone involved in Iris's murder and end them." Her voice carried the flat calm that came before violence, the decision already made, and implementation just a matter of execution. "Elena, don't." She met his eyes, and Marcus saw something in her expression that he recognized from mirrors after Sarah's death, the look of someone who'd run out of reasons not to embrace the darkest parts of themselves. "Iris was my roommate at the academy, my friend when I had exactly 0 people I could trust. She had nothing to do with this investigation, nothing except the mistake of knowing me. They killed her to send a message. So I'm going to send one back, written in the blood of everyone who thought threatening me was good strategy." Marcus felt his wolf respond to the challenge in her tone, the alpha instinct to either dominate or submit when faced with another predator's fury. But he'd learned through 2 decades of leadership that sometimes the right response was neither "your way gets Iris killed," "my way, we do this smart." "Your way got her killed." Elena's words hit like physical blows. 3 days of analyzing files and running investigations while professional contractors hunted through packless communities looking for leverage against me. 3 days where we could have moved faster, acted, instead of planning, done something other than sit in this fucking palace, Pretending political process matters more than keeping people alive. The accusation landed in Marcus's chest like shrapnel. She wasn't wrong. He'd prioritize caution over speed investigation, over immediate action, the careful approach that protected long-term stability at the cost of short-term casualties. It was sound tactical thinking. It was also the kind of decision that got people killed while you were still planning the perfect response. Garrett spoke before Marcus could respond, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd made the same calculation too many times. She's right, sir. We've been reactive, defensive. Whoever is running this operation keeps moving while we're stuck analyzing their last attack. Marcus felt the walls closing in pressure, building from all sides, council members he couldn't trust, contractors hunting through his territory. Elena's grief-driven rage threatening to turn into a suicide mission. And underneath it all, the growing certainty that careful planning was just another word for paralysis. He made the decision that would either end the conspiracy or get them all killed. Tomorrow morning, I announce Elena as my intended mate. The silence that followed was absolute. Elena stared at him like he'd started speaking a language she didn't recognize. What? Public mate announcement. It gives you protected status, can't be killed openly without declaring war on me personally. Forces the conspirators to use insider attacks instead of external contractors, which means they have to expose their people. As future queen, you get access to all council records, legal authority to question anyone in 5 territories protection that makes you too visible to disappear. Marcus kept his voice level, tactical, laying out strategy like a military briefing. We use you as bait while maintaining defensive position. They come for you, we catch them. Simple. That's insane. Elena's professional mask cracked enough to show genuine shock beneath. You're asking me to fake a relationship while investigating a murder conspiracy that just killed my best friend. I'm asking you to trust me with your life like I'm trusting you with mine. Marcus held her gaze, letting her see past Alpha authority to the exhausted soldier underneath. This is sound strategy, risky as hell, but sound. We make you untouchable through political protection while investigating from inside their structure. It's the only way to move fast enough to matter. Elena looked between Marcus and Garrett, calculating odds with the speed that came from years of intelligence work. What happens after we catch them, the fake mate thing? Marcus had anticipated the question, prepared an answer that was honest even if incomplete. We end it. Mutual dissolution, no strings, no obligations beyond what we incur during the operation. You get justice for Iris and Jason. I get my territory secure. We both walk away clean. You've done this before. Not a question, an accusation wrapped in analysis. Fake relationships for a tactical advantage. No, but I've sacrificed everything else for duty. The admission came easier than expected, truth cutting through political calculation. What's one more performance if it keeps you breathing long enough to finish what Jason started? Something flickered in Elena's expression. Recognition, maybe the understanding that came when one damaged person recognized another. She studied Marcus with those winter ice eyes. Whatever she'd learned during 12 years of intelligence work, apparently finding something trustworthy beneath his exhaustion. One condition, when this goes wrong, not if more people died because we're using me as bait, that's on both of us. Shared responsibility, shared consequences. Agreed. Marcus felt the weight settle across his shoulders, another burden added to the collection he'd been carrying since his father's assassination. Garrett, we need a convincing cover story. How did we meet? Why the mate bond? Something that holds up under scrutiny. Garrett's tactical mind engaged immediately. Keep it simple. You met during the security audit Elena was conducting. Professional relationship developed into personal. Bond formed during crisis situation, the ambush at her safe house. Fast timeline, but crisis accelerates everything, and wolves will buy that intensity under threat. Conditions creates genuine bonds. Elena nodded slowly. It's plausible, close enough to truth that we won't trip over contradictions. Press conference tomorrow morning then. Marcus checked the time. 0300 hours, which meant he had been awake for 22 hours and operating on the edge of functional. Get some rest, both of you. We need to be sharp for this. Garrett left. Elena remained standing in the war room's harsh lighting, looking more fragile than Marcus had seen since they'd met. The professional armor had cracked grief bleeding through in the set of her shoulders and the tightness around her eyes. Her voice came out rough. Iris had a daughter, Hope. She's 10 years old, living with Iris's parents in Northern Crescent Territory. When we find the people who did this, when we have them in custody and trials and all the official processes you alpha types love, I want Hope to know a justice happened. I want that little girl to grow up understanding her mother's death meant something. Marcus understood what she was really saying, that some debts couldn't be paid with arrests and trials, that justice sometimes looked like vengeance. Wearing a suit, but you did it anyway because the alternative was admitting the system didn't work and nothing mattered. He'd felt that way after Sarah's death, standing at her grave, while PAC officials explained the administrative failures that killed her with the kind of bureaucratic language that made murder sound like accounting errors. Hope will know, he promised. We'll make sure. Elena left without responding. Marcus watched security feeds track her progress to her quarters, saw her check every corner and entry point before finally sitting down on the bed with her head in her hands. The cameras didn't capture audio, but he could read body language well enough. She was breaking the accumulated trauma of Jason's murder and Iris's death and 2 years of hunting ghosts, finally overwhelming the tactical discipline that kept her functional. He should let her grieve privately, should maintain professional distance and respect her need for space. Instead, he found himself walking to her quarters, overriding the security lock, with his authority codes entering without announcement because asking permission would give her the chance to refuse, and right now she needed someone to witness her pain more than she needed isolation. Elena looked up when he entered, surprise flickering across her face before settling into resignation. I'm fine. No, you're not. Neither am I. But we can be not fine together instead of separately, which is slightly less miserable. Marcus sat on the floor with his back against the wall, deliberately choosing a position that put him lower than her non-threatening in body language, if not in actual capability. You don't have to talk. I'm just here so you're not alone. The silence stretched. Marcus counted his breaths, an old meditation technique that helped when his wolf got too aggressive or memories became too vivid. Elena sat on the bed looking at nothing, processing trauma in whatever way 12 years of military service had taught her to handle unbearable loss. Finally, she spoke, voice stripped of professional detachment. Iris used to make me tea. This specific blend she ordered from some specialty shop claimed it had medicinal properties, but mostly it just tasted good. She'd bring it to my room at the academy when I was drowning in case studies in legal theory, sit with me while I studied, talk about everything except coursework. She was the first person in years who treated me like a human instead of a weapon or a problem. Marcus listened, understanding the weight of what Elena was sharing, not just memories, but the recognition of how rare genuine connection had become in a life built around operational security and tactical thinking. She helped me move into my first safe house after discharge, Elena continued. Showed up with a truck and 6 packless volunteers, didn't ask why I needed reinforced doors and sight lines on all entry points, just helped me build something that felt defensible. She knew what I'd been through, even if I never said the words. Some things you don't need to explain to people who've survived their own version of hell. She sounds like someone worth remembering. She was someone worth protecting. And I failed. The words came out raw self-recrimination that Marcus recognized because he'd lived it for 8 years after Sarah's death. They killed her to get to me, used her as a message. And I was sitting in this palace, analyzing financial records while they tortured my friend to death. Marcus kept his voice level, offering truth instead of comfort. You couldn't have prevented it. Even if you'd moved faster, acted immediately, they would have found some other way to apply pressure. Professional contractors understand leverage. They would have kept escalating until they found something that broke you. That's supposed to make me feel better. No, it's supposed to make you understand that guilt is useless right now. Iris died because people running this conspiracy are willing to murder anyone who threatens their operation. That's on them, not you. What's on you is making sure her death accomplishes something beyond trauma. We find the people responsible, we end their operation, we make sure hope grows up in a world where this kind of corruption gets punished instead of rewarded. Elena studied him with red-rimmed eyes. How long did it take you to believe that about your mate's death? The question landed like a gut punch. Marcus felt his wolf surge, old wounds ripping open, but he forced himself to answer honestly. 8 years and counting. Some days I still don't. But I get up anyway because the alternative is giving up. And Sarah deserved better than me, collapsing into grief and letting everything she believed in fall apart. That's exhausting. Yes, Marcus didn't try to dress it up, didn't offer false hope or motivational speeches. It's brutally, endlessly exhausting. But it's also the only way forward that doesn't involve eating a bullet or disappearing into the wilderness and letting my wolf take over permanently. So I choose exhaustion. Every morning I wake up and choose to keep going. Eventually it becomes habit instead of choice. Elena laughed, the sound bitter but genuine. You're really bad at pep talks. I'm better at truth. Pep talks are for people who need lies dressed up as inspiration. You strike me as someone who'd rather have honesty even when it tastes like ash. Yeah, she wiped her eyes, professional mask starting to rebuild itself layer by layer. Okay, we do this your way. Fake made announcement, use me as bait. Catch the bastards and make sure Hope knows justice happened. But Marcus, she used his name deliberately, stripping away formal titles. When we find them, I'm in the interrogation room. I need to look them in the eyes and know they understand what they took from that little girl. Done. Marcus stood, offering his hand to help her up. Try to sleep. Tomorrow starts the performance of a lifetime. She took his hand, grip firm despite exhaustion. Just so we're clear, this is purely tactical. Professional partnership with performance requirements. Nothing personal. Absolutely. Purely tactical. Marcus agreed, ignoring the small voice in the back of his mind that whispered about how comfortable he felt in her presence, how her grief resonated with his own in ways that made isolation feel slightly less permanent. Get some rest. He left before the conversation could get more complicated. The press conference happened at 0900 hours in the palace's formal receiving hall. Every major PAC media outlet present, along with independent journalists who'd earned access through years of accurate reporting. Marcus stood at a podium designed to project authority, while Elena waited slightly behind, dressed in formal attire that somehow managed to look both professional and mate-appropriate. And Garrett had coached them through the performance body language that suggested intimacy without being obvious, the occasional glance that implied private communication, the kind of subtle markers that would read as genuine, fine to wolves whose instincts made them sensitive to pack bonding cues. Marcus kept his voice formal, hitting marks they'd rehearsed. I've called you here to announce a personal matter that affects PAC leadership. After years prioritizing duty over personal life, I've found my mate, Elena Reeves, former Army officer, current security consultant. The bond formed during recent security operations crisis has a way of clarifying what matters. The assembled reporters erupted with questions. Marcus fielded the easy ones first, establishing baseline narrative before anyone could dig into inconsistencies. Where did they meet? Security audit. How long had they known each other? 3 weeks, but intensity of recent events accelerated natural bonding. What about her PACless status? That question came from a reporter who'd built a career on exposing PAC corruption, her voice sharp with skepticism. Ms. Reeves has no PAC affiliation, no political connections, no obvious value in terms of alliance building. Why her? Elena stepped forward before Marcus could respond, her voice carrying the cold authority of someone who gave zero fucks about political niceties. Because I'm competent at my job and he's not shopping for political advantages. Next question. The room temperature dropped. Reporters exchanged glances, recalculating story angles. This wasn't the traditional mate announcement they'd expected, no blushing declarations of love, no carefully rehearsed romance narrative. Just two professionals stating facts and daring anyone to challenge them. It was perfect. Marcus watched council members' reactions from security feeds Garrett had positioned throughout the room. Christine Mallory looked surprised but not hostile. Garrett Stone's disapproval was obvious. Devin Cross seemed amused. Kira Walsh's expression remained calculatingly neutral. But it was the reaction from someone not on the council that caught Marcus's attention, a junior advisor to Garrett Stone, young male wolf who'd been present at previous meetings but never warranted close scrutiny. The advisor's micro-expression when Elena stepped forward showed something that looked like recognition, followed immediately by poorly concealed concern. Marcus made a mental note, flagging the detail for later analysis. The press conference wrapped after 30 minutes of increasingly hostile questions that Elena handled with brutal efficiency. She didn't try to charm anyone, didn't perform traditional mate behavior, just stated facts and shut down speculation with the kind of directness that either earned respect or made enemies. Probably both. They retreated to Marcus's private office, dropping the performance the moment the door closed. Elena collapsed into a chair with the boneless exhaustion of someone running on fumes. That was worse than hostile interrogations. At least with enemy combatants, you can threaten them. You essentially did threaten them, just with professional competence instead of physical violence. Marcus pulled up security footage, reviewing reactions frame by frame. Did you notice Garrett Stone's advisor, young male, brown hair, positioned slightly behind and to the left during announcements? Elena's exhaustion evaporated, replaced by tactical focus. Thomas Webb, 26, graduated top of his class from Pacific Academy, hired by Garrett Stone 3 years ago. No red flags in his background check, but he moved from packless community to trusted advisor position suspiciously fast. You researched all of Garrett's staff. I researched everyone within 3 degrees of separation from the council. That's basic counterintelligence. You don't just look at primary targets, you map their networks and identify vulnerable points. She pulled up her own files, cross-referencing against the security footage. Webb reacted to my presence. Recognition first, then concern. Which means either he knows me from somewhere I don't remember, or he knows about me from briefings I wasn't aware existed. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. Garrett Stone has access to everything: council records, security protocols, financial systems. But he's also rigidly traditional, operates with a personal honor code that would make corruption difficult. However, if someone close to him was dirty, using his authority without his knowledge, then you get someone with access and motivation, but no personal red flags that would trigger internal investigation. Elena's mind was racing, connecting dots that had seemed random until now. Webb could have issued the kill order through Christine's codes if he had access to Garrett's systems. Could have coordinated contractor payments, arranged Jason's murder, all while staying invisible because everyone was looking at council members instead of their staff. Garrett entered without knocking, his expression grim. "Sir, we have a situation. Thomas Webb just requested emergency leave, claimed family illness. Left the compound 20 minutes ago." Marcus and Elena exchanged looks. Sometimes tactical hunches paid off faster than careful investigation. "Track him," Marcus ordered. "Full surveillance, discreet tail. I want to know everywhere he goes and everyone he contacts. And get me complete background on Webb, not just official records, but financial activity, communications, travel history, everything." Garrett nodded and left. Marcus turned back to Elena. "If Webb runs, it confirms guilt, but we lose our lead into the larger conspiracy. If he's meeting someone, we might finally identify who's running this operation. Or it's coincidence, and we're chasing shadows while the real conspirator laughs at us." Elena's skepticism was professional rather than personal. "We need more than suspicion. We need evidence that would stand up in court. Then we get evidence, follow Webb, see where he goes, document everything. When he leads us to his handler, we have proof." The next 6 hours were textbook surveillance operation. Garrett's team tracked Webb through Portland using discreet tail vehicles and aerial drone coverage, building a pattern of movement that suggested someone trying to detect surveillance while not being skilled enough to actually lose professional operators. Webb made 4 stops: a coffee shop, where he met briefly with an unknown female, a park where he sat on a bench for 30 minutes, apparently doing nothing, a shipping company warehouse where he entered through a side door, and finally a residential address in a neighborhood expensive enough to require serious money. Elena reviewed the footage with the focus of someone trained to extract meaning from incomplete data. The coffee shop meeting was counter-surveillance check. The park was dead drop watch. His right hand at timestamp 14:22, he retrieved something from under the bench. The warehouse is interesting because that's Kira Walsh's shipping company, and the residential address, she pulled up property records, is owned by a shell corporation registered in Western Coastal Territory. Walsh's territory. Marcus felt his wolf growl low in his chest. Kira Walsh had always been calculatingly neutral, the kind of political operator who sold loyalty to highest bidders and maintain careful distance from anything that might compromise her economic empire. If she was running the medical supply corruption, it would explain the sophistication of the operation and the resources available for professional contractors. "We need to raid that warehouse," Elena said. "Catch Walsh with evidence before she can destroy it. That requires council approval for operations in another Alpha's territory. And if Walsh has other council members compromised, asking permission means tipping her off." Marcus ran through tactical options, each one carrying unacceptable risks. "We need proof before we move, something concrete enough that even compromised council members can't ignore it. Then we go in quietly. Discreet reconnaissance, photograph evidence, get out before anyone knows we were there." Elena was already planning the operation. Tactical mind engaged. Two-person team, minimal footprint, in and out in 30 minutes. "We do it tonight before Walsh realizes Webb's surveillance was detected." Marcus should have objected, should have said this was too dangerous, that sending the AlphaKing and his supposed mate on an illegal black bag operation into another territory was insane. But his wolf was growling agreement, in the part of him that had spent 20 years conducting exactly these kinds of operations in places more hostile than a shipping warehouse, was already calculating entry points and extraction routes. "Tonight," he agreed, 2,300 hours. We go in dark, photograph whatever Webb picked up or dropped off, and disappear before anyone knows we were there." Garrett looked like he wanted to object when they briefed him, but 15 years of partnership meant he recognized when Marcus had made a decision that wouldn't be changed by logical arguments. "Sir, if this goes wrong, if you're caught conducting illegal operations in Walsh's territory, the political fallout could destroy the unified pack structure. If I don't act and more packless wolves die while I'm waiting for council approval, the unified pack structure deserves to be destroyed." Marcus met Garrett's eyes. "Sometimes you have to choose between legal and right. Tonight we choose right." Elena was already suiting up in tactical gear that looked more natural on her than formal clothing had. She moved through weapons check with practiced efficiency, loading magazines and testing equipment with the muscle memory that came from years of forward deployment. Marcus watched her work and understood why Jason had hired her. Despite the risks, Elena Reeves was the kind of operator who got missions accomplished regardless of obstacles or personal cost. They left the palace through a service entrance at 22:45 hours using an unmarked vehicle in civilian clothing. The drive to Walsh's warehouse district took 40 minutes through Portland streets that grew progressively more industrial and less populated. Perfect territory for illegal activity. No residential witnesses, minimal foot traffic, security focused on preventing theft rather than detecting covert intrusion. Elena surveyed the warehouse from a block away using night vision optics to map guard positions and security systems. 4 exterior guards rotating patrol pattern every 12 minutes. Internal security is electronic motion sensors, cameras, pressure plates on main entrances. But there's a loading dock on the east side that shows heat signature suggesting regular use. We go in there, bypass the electronic security, document whatever Webb dropped off, and extract. Marcus nodded, his wolf pushing close to the surface as adrenaline flooded his system. This felt right in a way palace politics never did: clear, objective tactical execution, immediate feedback on whether you succeeded or failed. War was simpler than peace. They moved during the guard rotation gap, crossing open ground in a sprint that covered 50 yards in seconds. Elena reached the loading dock first, already working on the electronic lock with tools that suggested her intelligence training had included more than just interrogation techniques. The lock clicked open in 30 seconds. Inside the warehouse was a maze of shipping containers and industrial equipment. Elena led the way, moving through darkness with night vision that turned everything into green-tinted shapes. They found what they were looking for in a corner office, a desk covered in manifests and shipping records, a laptop left open and unlocked, and a locked cabinet that Elena opened, with the kind of casual expertise that made Marcus wonder exactly what her classified service record contained. The cabinet held files, physical documents, the kind intelligence agencies used when electronic records were too easily traced. Elena photographed everything with rapid efficiency, while Marcus kept watch his enhanced hearing tracking guard movements outside. The documents told a story of systematic corruption spanning 3 years. Medical supplies ordered through official channels diverted to Walsh's shipping network, sold on black market at massive markup. The operation generated millions in profits split between multiple parties whose names were carefully coded, but whose roles were obvious from context. And there, in a memo dated 2 weeks before Jason's death, was the smoking gun authorization to eliminate security risk, with a description matching Jason's investigation activities. The authorization came from someone identified only as primary, but the routing information showed it had been processed through Walsh's systems. Elena finished photographing, started to close the cabinet when Marcus's wolf screamed a warning. He grabbed Elena and dove behind a desk just as the office door burst open and armed contractors flooded in. 6 of them, professional military, bearing weapons up and scanning for targets. They'd walked into a trap. Marcus's tactical mind processed the situation in milliseconds. They were outnumbered, outgunned in hostile territory with no immediate backup. The contractors had them pinned with superior position and firepower. Standard doctrine said surrender, negotiate, try to survive until reinforcements arrived. Marcus had never been good at following standard doctrine. He shifted partially, letting his wolf's strength flood his human form without fully transforming. The enhanced speed and power that came with the shift made him fast enough to close distance before the contractors could track him. He hit the first one like a freight train, precision strikes that disabled without killing, because corpses created political complications. Elena moved simultaneously, her combat training translating into brutal efficiency. She took down 2 contractors with joint locks and pressure point strikes, disarmed a third, and used his weapon to provide covering fire while Marcus handled the others. The fight lasted maybe 90 seconds. When it ended, 6 contractors were unconscious or too injured to continue fighting. Marcus and Elena stood in the ruined office, breathing hard, weapons trained on the door in case reinforcements arrived. None did. Whatever trap had been set, it hadn't included backup teams. Elena checked her camera images intact. We've got the evidence, but they knew we were coming. Marcus's wolf snarled agreement. Someone had tipped Walsh off, which meant someone in his inner circle was compromised. The list of people who knew about tonight's operation was short: Marcus, Elena, Garrett, and the 2 guards who'd provided perimeter security. One of them was dirty. They extracted through the loading dock, moving fast through darkness toward their vehicle. Marcus expected pursued ambush, some kind of follow-up attack, but the industrial district remained quiet except for distant traffic sounds. Too quiet. His instincts were screaming trap, but nothing materialized. They made it back to the palace at 200 hours. Garrett met them in the war room, his expression carefully neutral in that way that meant he'd already heard something Marcus wasn't going to like. Report, Marcus demanded. Sir, while you were conducting your operation, we received intel from field teams. Another murder. Packless male, same professional torture pattern. This time they left a video. The security screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage of a bound wolf being interrogated by someone off camera. The questions were specific. What did Jason Reeves tell you? Where are the hidden files? Who else is investigating? The wolf's answers were desperate denials, screaming that he didn't know anything, that he was just a community organizer with no connection to investigations. They killed him anyway. The video ended with a message typed across black screen: Alpha Stone, call off your mate or the killing continues. Elena's face drained of color. Marcus felt his wolf surge with protective fury. When was this sent? Marcus kept his voice level through sheer force of will. 20 minutes ago, while you were still on site at Walsh's warehouse. Garrett met his eyes. Sir, they knew exactly where you were and timed the murder to coincide with your operation. Someone in our security apparatus is feeding them real-time intelligence. The implications hit like physical blows. This wasn't just corruption investigation, this was active counterintelligence operation against an enemy embedded in Marcus's own organization. Someone with access to secure communications, operational planning, enough authority that their reports wouldn't be questioned. Marcus looked at Elena and saw the same realization in her expression. They'd exposed themselves tonight, revealed tactical capabilities and investigative focus. Whoever was running this conspiracy now knew exactly how dangerous Marcus and Elena were. And they'd responded by escalating the body count. Sleep was theoretical concept Marcus had abandoned somewhere around 0400 hours when the 3rd body turned up. Another packless wolf, another professional execution, another message that made it clear the conspiracy wasn't intimidated by an AlphaKing and his supposed mate conducting amateur investigations. The war room smelled like stale coffee and exhaustion security feeds flickering across screens that showed nothing useful while people died in the dark corners of his territory. Elena sat cross-legged on the floor surrounded by paper Christine's files. The warehouse photographs Thomas Webb's background check witness statements from 3 murders that followed the same professional pattern. She'd been arranging and rearranging evidence for 6 hours looking for the connection that would make everything click into place. Her blonde hair had escaped its tactical braid, falling around a face that looked older than 32 in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Marcus watched her work and felt something crack in his chest that had nothing to do with tactical partnership or operational necessity. She was destroying herself, hunting ghosts, running on fury and grief, and the desperate need to make Iris's death mean something beyond random violence. He recognized the pattern because he'd lived it after Sarah died, the obsessive focus that looked like dedication, but was really just another form of breaking down. Garrett entered carrying food neither of them would eat and news that wouldn't improve the situation. Sir Counsel is demanding emergency session. They want answers about last night's operation in Walsh's territory. Someone leaked details to the media. There are reporters camped outside asking why the AlphaKing conducted a illegal black bag operation without council approval. Of course, someone had leaked it, because whoever was running this conspiracy understood that exposing Marcus's actions would force political crisis that distracted from investigation. Classic counterintelligence. When you can't stop the operation, you discredit the operators. Elena looked up from her paper maze. Who knew about last night besides us 3? 2 perimeter guards, both with 10+ years service and clean backgrounds. My second in command who coordinated extraction backup. And Garrett hesitated in a way that made Marcus's wolf growl low. And I mentioned it to my administrative assistant when coordinating schedule changes. Thomas Webb's replacement after Webb went on leave. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Thomas Webb hadn't been running the operation. He'd been a distraction, a sacrificial piece moved into position, so Marcus would waste resources chasing him while the real infiltrator stayed invisible. And when Webb's usefulness ended, they'd simply inserted another compromise operative into the same position. Marcus felt cold rage settle over him, the kind that came before violence. Name: Sarah Blackwood, 45, former Royal Guard commander, retired 3 years ago, came back as civilian administrator 6 months ago. Garrett's expression showed he'd already reached the same conclusions Marcus was processing. She has access to everything, sir. Security protocols, operational planning, personnel files. If she's dirty, she's been feeding intelligence to the conspiracy for half a year. Wait, Elena stood her movement predatory. Where is she now? Administrative wing coordinating council session, logistics. Detain her, quietly, full isolation, no communications, no chance to warn anyone that we're onto her. Marcus's voice carried alpha command, the tone that made subordinates move without questioning orders. And Garrett, I want complete audit of everyone she's had contact with, of every file she's accessed, every communication she's sent. If Blackwood is compromised, she didn't work alone. Garrett left. Elena turned to Marcus with winter ice eyes that had gone colder than he'd seen even during firefights. If Blackwood's been feeding them intelligence for 6 months, she knows everything. Our investigation, our evidence, which witnesses we've contacted. Everyone who helped us is now a target. The implications cascaded through Marcus's tactical mind. Packless wolves who'd spoken to Elena about Jason's investigation, medical administrators who'd provided shipping records, community organizers who'd identified supply shortages. Dozens of potential witnesses, all of them vulnerable, all of them marked for elimination because Sarah Blackwood had sold their identities to professional killers. His phone buzzed. Garrett's voice came through tight with barely controlled fury. Sir, Blackwood's gone. Left the compound 40 minutes ago, claiming she needed to pick up documents from her home. Security logs show she hasn't returned. We've got teams en route to her residence, but she's running. Marcus was already moving toward the armory, Elena matching his pace. She knows we're on to her, burned her cover, heading for whoever is running this operation. Or she's leading us into another trap. Elena pulled weapons from tactical lockers with practiced efficiency. They've baited us before. What makes this different? Because this time we don't have a choice. Blackwood knows where every witness is hiding. If we don't catch her in the next few hours, they'll systematically eliminate everyone who could testify against them. Marcus loaded magazines, checked equipment, felt his wolf pressing against his skin, demanding the hunt. We go after her now, follow wherever she leads, and end this tonight. Elena met his eyes with an expression that mixed professional assessment with something darker. You understand this might be exactly what they want, force us into confrontation on ground they've prepared eliminate us along with the evidence. I understand. Marcus felt the weight of command, the calculation that traded certain small casualties for a potential larger victory. But the alternative is letting them kill witnesses while we wait for perfect tactical conditions that will never arrive. Sometimes you have to choose between bad options and worse ones. They assembled a team in the underground garage, Garrett plus 4 operators. Marcus trusted with his life, with combat experience that went beyond ceremonial guard duty. Devin Cross showed up uninvited, dressed in tactical gear that looked more natural than his council robes. Heard you might need backup from someone who actually knows how to run offensive operations. Marcus should have sent him away, maintained proper chain of command, kept council members separate from direct action. But Devin had been Delta Force for 20 years, had operated in places hostile enough that Portland warehouses looked comfortable, and right now Marcus needed competence more than political propriety. Welcome aboard. Try not to get killed. I can't afford to lose another council member. Marcus briefed the team with tactical precision. Blackwood has 40-minute head start. Traffic cameras tracked her to industrial district near Walsh's shipping warehouse. Either she's meeting her handler or leading us somewhere she thinks gives them advantage. We locate, observe, and if opportunity presents, we capture alive. Questions? None. Professional soldiers didn't waste time on obvious points. They moved out in 3 vehicles, spacing themselves to avoid looking like convoy while maintaining tactical coordination. Garrett navigated using real-time satellite feeds that showed heat signatures in the warehouse district. Multiple vehicles, at least 15 bodies, concentrated in and around the shipping facility Marcus and Elena had raided 12 hours ago. Elena studied the tactical display with cold assessment. That's too many for simple meat. They're expecting us. Prepared defensive position, probably with external security and multiple escape routes. Good. Marcus felt his wolf surge, eager for confrontation after days of investigation and political maneuvering. Means we've got them worried enough to show force. Worried people make mistakes. Devin Cross checked his weapon with movements that spoke to thousands of repetitions. Worried people also kill anyone who threatens them. We're outnumbered 3-to-1, attacking prepared position with 0 backup and questionable legal authority. This is suicide mission dressed up as tactical operation. Then leave. Marcus kept his voice level. I won't order anyone into this who isn't committed. Devin grinned, expression predatory. Didn't say I wouldn't do it, just making sure everyone understands the odds before we walk into hell. They parked 3 blocks out and approached on foot, moving through shadows with the coordination that came from professional military training. The warehouse looked different at night. Industrial lighting created harsh pools of illumination, separated by darkness deep enough to hide movement. Guards patrolled perimeter with discipline that confirmed Marcus's assessment. These weren't local security. They were contractors with serious training. Elena led them to an elevated position overlooking the main entrance, using night vision to map defensive positions. 12 exterior guards rotating patrol pattern with overlapping fields of fire. Internal unknown but assumed similar numbers. Main entrance is killbox crossfires from 3 positions. Loading dock has 2 guards but better cover on approach. Roof access on east side looks unguarded, but that's probably intentional. Marcus processed the tactical situation, weighing options that all looked like variations on bad ideas. We need positional advantage and surprise. Garrett, take 2 operators and secure roof access, even if it's trapped, better to trigger it on our terms. Devin, you and I will hit loading dock hard and fast, create chaos that draws their attention. Elena, I go through the kill box. Her voice carried absolute conviction. They're expecting indirect approach, tactical sophistication, military doctrine. So I walk through the front door like I belong there, like I'm Blackwood arriving for meeting. By the time they realize I'm not supposed to be there, you'll be hitting them from 2 other directions. It was insane, tactically brilliant, and completely insane. Marcus felt his wolf howl protest the alpha instinct to protect, warring with professional assessment that said Elena's plan offered their best chance of success. They'll shoot you the moment they recognize you're not Blackwood. Not if I'm already close enough that shooting me means hitting their own people. Not if I move with confidence instead of caution. Elena checked her weapon expression, showing no doubt. I've walked into hostile situations before. This is just another Thursday. Devin looked between them, then shrugged. Lady's got bigger balls than most Delta operators I've known. Let her run her play. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to find tactical objection that wasn't just emotional response to the thought of Elena walking into crossfire. But she was right. Surprise and audacity sometimes worked where caution failed and they needed every advantage against superior numbers. 5 minutes, he agreed. Garrett secures roof. I hit loading dock, you walk through front. We coordinate timing so all three breaches happen simultaneously. Clear, clear. They split up. Marcus and Devin moved toward the loading dock using shipping containers for cover as they closed distance. His wolf pressed close to surface, ready to shift if situation required enhanced strength and speed. Devin moved with like violence waiting to happen, weapon up and tracking threats with the automatic assessment of someone who'd survived countless similar operations. Through his earpiece, Marcus heard Garrett's whispered update. Roof secured. 3 hostiles eliminated silently. We've got overwatch position and clear sight lines into main warehouse floor. Counting 20-plus hostiles inside all armed professional spacing. This is military unit, not security contractors. Marcus processed that with growing concern. Military unit meant command structure, tactical coordination resources that went beyond what even wealthy alphas could typically afford. Whoever was running this conspiracy had access to serious firepower and trained soldiers. Elena's voice came through steady despite circumstances. Approaching front entrance, 2 guards, both male 30s, carrying automatic weapons. They were bored, not alert. I'm going in. Marcus watched from his position as Elena simply walked toward the entrance, posture confident and purposeful, like she had every right to be there. The guards straightened when they saw her hands moving toward weapons, then hesitating as she got close enough that aggression would look like overreaction. She said something Marcus couldn't hear. The guards relaxed fractionally. Then Elena moved. 2 strikes, precision targeting nerve clusters that dropped both guards before they could raise weapons. She grabbed one guard's radio, spoke into it with voice disguised by static. Perimeter secured. Primary is entering now. The response came in Russian accented English. Understood. Send her to the office. Marcus felt cold certainty settle over him. These weren't just contractors, they were foreign operatives working on American soil. That level of infiltration meant this conspiracy reached beyond pack politics into territory that would trigger federal investigation if exposed. He waited until Elena disappeared inside, counting seconds, then signaled Devin, go. They hit the loading dock with overwhelming violence. Marcus shifted partially, letting wolf strength flood his system as he tore the door off its hinges. Devin moved through the breach, throwing flashbangs, the disorienting blast buying them critical seconds. The interior was chaos of noise and movement, contractors scrambling for weapons, shouted orders in multiple languages, returned fire that came too slow to stop Marcus and Devin from establishing position. They drilled together enough over the years that communication was mostly unnecessary, each anticipating the other's movement through trained intuition. Garrett's team opened fire from roof position, precision shots that took down hostiles attempting to flank Marcus and Devin. The warehouse became killing ground, contractors caught between 3-point attack with no clear defensive position. Marcus tracked Elena's progress through bond that shouldn't have existed between fake mates, but somehow did. Anyway, he could feel her moving deeper into the warehouse, sense her tactical focus and controlled aggression. She was heading towards something, following an objective, while chaos erupted around her. The office. Marcus fought his way through contractors with brutal efficiency, his wolf strength making him faster and more dangerous than human opponents could match. Devin covered his advanced professional discipline, keeping their formation tight, even as the situation deteriorated into close-quarters nightmare. They found Elena outside a reinforced office door, her weapon trained on it while she worked the lock with tools that suggested intelligence training had been very thorough. She'd acquired blood on her tactical vest, from somewhere, expression cold with focus. Blackwood's inside, Elena said without looking away from her work. With someone else. Female voice, American accent, position of authority in how she's giving orders. The lock's biometric I can bypass, but it'll take 2 minutes. We don't have 2 minutes. Marcus could hear reinforcements moving through the warehouse coordinated response that meant the initial chaos was wearing off. Devin, hold this position. Garrett, we need... The office door exploded outward. Marcus's wolf screamed warning as shape charge detonated blast wave, throwing all three of them backward. His enhanced durability absorbed most of the impact, but Devin went down hard, stunned. Elena rolled with the blast, came up with weapon raised, but the figure emerging from the ruined office was already moving. Kira Walsh. The Western Coastal Alpha moved with speed that spoke to serious combat training, striking Elena with precision that sent her weapon flying. They went down together, close quarters, grappling that looked more like professional MMA than typical wolf fighting. Marcus shifted fully, letting his wolf take over as he charged Walsh. But she was ready, sidestepping his attack with matador timing and using his momentum against him. Her hand came up, holding pistol that tracked toward his head. Sarah Blackwood appeared in the office doorway, her own weapon raised, and for one crystalline moment, Marcus couldn't process who she was aiming at. Then Blackwood fired. The round hit Kira Walsh center mass, dropping her. Blackwood kept firing 3 more rounds in tight grouping that spoke to expert marksmanship until Walsh stopped moving. The warehouse fell silent except for ringing ears and labored breathing. Marcus shifted back to human form, staring at Blackwood in complete confusion. She'd been the leak, the traitor feeding intelligence to the conspiracy. She'd run when they'd tried to detain her. Every piece of evidence suggested she was working with Walsh. Yet she just killed her supposed partner. Elena recovered her weapon, trained it on Blackwood, with hands that didn't shake despite the explosion. Explain now before I decide you're the next target. Blackwood lowered her weapon slowly, movements careful. I'm Federal Bureau of Investigation. Undercover for 18 months, investigating international weapons trafficking ring, operating through packed territories. Walsh was the American contact point for Russian military contractors selling stolen U.S. weapons. The medical supply theft was funding mechanism. They'd steal supplies, sell them, use profits to purchase weapons they'd then sell to foreign buyers. Marcus felt reality tilt sideways. You're FBI. Deep cover, so deep that even my own handlers lost track of me 6 months ago when the operation got complicated. Blackwood pulled badge from concealed pocket, tossed it to Elena, who caught it one-handed. I couldn't break cover to warn you because Walsh had informants everywhere, including possibly in federal agencies. When you started investigating medical theft, you stumbled into my operation and almost blew 3 years of work. Elena examined the badge with tactical focus. This could be fake. It's not, but you'll verify anyway because you're professional. Blackwood gestured to Walsh's body. I just burned my cover permanently by killing my target before we could arrest her entire network. My career is over, my operation is compromised, and you're welcome for saving your AlphaKing's life. Devin Cross groaned, sitting up with hand pressed to his head. Did I just hallucinate the part where our suspected traitor is actually FBI? No. Marcus felt exhaustion crash over him like physical weight. You hallucinated the part where anything about this operation made sense. Garrett's voice came through earpiece. Sir, we've got incoming. Multiple vehicles, federal markings. Looks like cavalry finally decided to show up. The next 3 hours were chaos of federal agents, evidence collection, witness statements, and jurisdictional arguments between PAC authority and FBI investigation. Marcus stood in the ruins of Walsh's warehouse, watching agents photograph bodies and catalog weapons, while his wolf howled exhausted protest. Elena appeared at his side, blood cleaned off her tactical vest, but bruises starting to show on her face where Walsh had landed. Hits. Blackwood's story checks out. FBI confirms she was deep cover investigating weapons trafficking that intersects with PAC territory. Walsh was running the operation using medical supply theft to fund weapon purchases. The Packless wolves were killed because Jason's investigation threatened to expose the funding mechanism. Marcus processed that feeling, pieces finally click into horrible clarity. Thomas Webb, low-level courier, didn't know the full scope, just that he was moving packages for Walsh and getting paid well. He's been detained by FBI, cooperating fully. Elena paused, studying Marcus with exhausted eyes. Iris died because Walsh's contractors were tying up loose ends. Anyone who talked to Jason, anyone who might have evidence, they would have kept killing until either we stopped them or they eliminated everyone who mattered. The guilt hit like fist to sternum. Marcus had been so focused on PAC corruption, on political conspiracy, that he'd missed the larger federal investigation happening under his territory. His mate had died from medical supply theft 8 years ago, yet he'd been too buried in PAC politics to see the pattern continuing. "It's not your fault." Elena's voice cut through his spiral. "You couldn't have known." Walsh was sophisticated professional, operating through shell companies and false identities. Even FBI took 3 years to build a case. Jason Reeves knew. He figured it out in 8 months. Jason Reeves got killed for being smart enough to connect dots no one else saw. Elena's expression softened fractionally. But his death meant something. His investigation led to Walsh's exposure to weapons trafficking, Ring being dismantled, to Blackwood completing her operation. That little girl Hope will grow up knowing her mother's death resulted in actual justice. Marcus wanted to believe that, wanted to find comfort in utilitarian calculation that traded individual lives for systemic improvement. But he'd been running that equation for 5 years, and the numbers never quite balanced. Federal agents finally cleared them to leave. Dawn was breaking over Portland, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that seemed too beautiful for a night that had ended in gunfire and explosions. Marcus drove back to the palace with Elena beside him, both too exhausted for conversation. The fake mate announcement seemed like lifetime ago instead of days. They'd gone through entire investigation, exposed corruption, survived multiple ambushes, all while performing political theater for council and media. The operation was over. Walsh was dead. The conspiracy was dismantled, which meant the tactical necessity for their arrangement had ended. Elena spoke first, voice carrying careful neutrality. "So we did what we set out to do. Found Jason's killers, got justice for Iris, stopped the medical supply theft. Congratulations. Our deal is complete." "Yes." Marcus kept his eyes on the road, not trusting himself to look at her. "You're free to walk away. No obligations, no strings, exactly as promised." The silence stretched uncomfortable and heavy. Marcus wanted to say something, wanted to articulate the feeling that had been building for days, that Elena's presence had made the isolation of his position feel less permanent, that her competence in brutal honesty had reminded him what partnership looked like beyond political calculation. But they'd agreed on terms. Professional partnership, tactical necessity, nothing personal. Saying anything now would violate that agreement, would turn clean operational ending into messy emotional complication neither of them needed. They reached the palace. Elena climbed out, stood looking at the building that had been temporary sanctuary. "I should pack, get out of your way, let you return to normal operations." "You could stay." The words escaped before Marcus could stop them. "Not as fake mate or tactical asset, just stay. Work with Garrett on security reform. Use your intelligence background to improve our counterintelligence protocols. The position is real if you want it." Elena studied him with those winter ice eyes that had gone slightly warmer over the past week. Is that offer coming from the AlphaKing or from Marcus? The question cut to the heart of everything Marcus had been avoiding, examining too closely. Was he offering professional position because Elena was competent, or because the thought of her leaving made his chest feel hollow in ways he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death? "Both," he admitted. "I need someone with your skills, but I also—" He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like emotional manipulation. "I also feel less alone when you're around," which is unprofessional and probably violates our agreement, but it's true. "Marcus, you don't have to decide now. Take time, think it through. Consider whether staying makes tactical sense." He was retreating into professional language safer than admitting how much her answer mattered. "Just know the option exists." Elena's expression shifted through several emotions too fast to track. "My partner was killed because I trusted the wrong person. Iris died because people close to me became targets. I've spent 2 years building walls specifically to avoid getting anyone else hurt, through proximity to my investigations. Staying here working for you, getting closer, that terrifies me more than gunfights and explosions." "I know." Marcus felt his wolf settle, recognizing truth when it was offered without performance. Trust is terrifying, so is loneliness. Sometimes you have to choose which fear you're willing to live with. He left before she could respond, giving her space to process without pressure of his presence. His office felt emptier than usual. Security feeds flickering with normal palace operations. that seemed surreal after a night of combat and federal raids. Garrett found him an hour later. Sir Counsel is demanding full briefing on last night's operation. Walsh's death has created power vacuum in Western Coastal Territory, and several regional alphas are already positioning to claim her assets. We've got political crisis on top of operational aftermath. We'll schedule it for tomorrow. Today I need... Marcus paused, uncertain what he needed beyond sleep and answers to questions he did not know how to ask. I need time to process. Understood. Garrett hesitated at the door. For what it's worth, Elena would be good permanent addition to security team. She's competent, tactically sound, and she makes you less of a miserable bastard to work with. That's worth keeping around. Marcus laughed despite exhaustion. Noted. Dismissed. The next 36 hours blurred together council meetings, federal debriefings, territorial negotiations, the endless administrative machinery of pack governance grinding through crisis response. Marcus moved through it all with automatic efficiency while part of his mind tracked Elena's location through security feeds. She hadn't left, hadn't packed or made departure arrangements. She'd moved from guest quarters to more permanent rooms, started working with Garrett on security protocol updates, integrated herself into palace operations with the casual competence of someone who decided to stay without formally announcing the decision. Marcus told himself not to read too much into it. Professional operators took time to transition between assignments. Elena was probably just completing due diligence before moving to her next case. The thought made his chest feel hollow anyway. 2 days after the warehouse raid, Marcus found Elena in the training facility at 0600 hours, running through hand-to-hand drills with intensity that spoke to working through trauma rather than maintaining skills. She moved like controlled violence, each strike precise and devastating, practicing scenarios that prepared for threats she'd already survived. He watched for several minutes before speaking. "You're staying." Elena didn't stop moving, temporarily, until Garrett gets new security protocols implemented, and I've finished debriefing your intelligence teams. And then, haven't decided. She finally paused, breathing hard, sweat making her tactical shirt cling. I'm not good at staying places, not good at letting people close enough to matter. Last time I did that, my partner died and Iris became a target. Safer to keep moving. Marcus stepped into the training space. Safer isn't the same as better. No, but it keeps people alive. Elena met his eyes. You asked if the job offer was coming from the AlphaKing or from Marcus. I need to know if I stay. What exactly are you asking for? Professional relationship, tactical, partnership, something more? The question deserved honesty even when honesty felt like standing in crossfire. I don't know. I haven't thought about anything beyond professional duty since Sarah died. Didn't think I could. Didn't think I deserved to after failing to protect her. Marcus forced himself to continue. But these past days working with you, seeing you operate, I remembered what it felt like to care about someone beyond operational necessity. That terrifies me almost as much as it apparently terrifies you. Elena laughed, the sound carrying genuine humor. So we're both traumatized operators with trust issues and dead partners trying to figure out if we can build something functional out of shared damage. That's your pitch. When you say it like that, it sounds terrible. It is terrible. She closed the distance between them. But it's also honest, which matters more than romantic gestures or perfect timing. Marcus felt hope flicker to life, cautious and fragile. So you'll stay. I'll try staying. See if I can manage it without running when things get difficult. Elena's expression showed vulnerability beneath tactical armor. But Marcus, if this goes wrong, if we hurt each other or I get someone killed through proximity, I need to know we can walk away cleanly. No drama, no forcing something that doesn't work just because we want it to. Agreed. He offered his hand, the gesture formal but carrying weight. Partnership, professional and personal. We try, we're honest about what works and what doesn't, and if it fails, we part as allies instead of enemies. Elena took his hand, grip firm. Deal. They stood like that while dawn light filtered through the training facility windows, two damaged soldiers choosing to risk connection despite every tactical reason to maintain isolation. It wasn't romantic declaration or passionate commitment. It was careful agreement between professionals who understood that sometimes the bravest thing was letting someone matter, despite knowing how badly that could hurt. Marcus's wolf settled satisfied in ways that had nothing to do with alpha authority, and everything to do with finding a partner who understood what service cost and chose to stand beside him anyway. The council session that afternoon went exactly as badly as Marcus expected. Christine Mallory demanded explanations for why federal investigation had operated in PAC territory without council knowledge. Garrett Stone questioned whether Marcus's judgment was compromised by personal involvement with Elena. Devin Cross defended the operation with military logic that several council members found insufficient. Through it all, Elena stood at Marcus's side not as decoration or political prop, but as professional security consultant who'd helped dismantle weapons trafficking ring. She fielded questions with brutal honesty, walked council members through the evidence with tactical precision, and made it clear that she gave exactly zero fucks about political theater when actual justice had been achieved. By the end, even hostile council members looked grudgingly impressed. Christine approached after the session, her expression thoughtful. "Ms. Reeves, I owe you an apology. I was investigating the same corruption, but stayed too cautious, too worried about political fallout. You and Marcus accomplished in days what I'd been attempting for months." Elena's response was characteristically direct. "You stayed cautious because you understood the political reality. We moved fast because we had less to lose. Different circumstances, different tactics. No apology necessary." Nevertheless, Christine turned to Marcus. "I'm formally proposing we create Office of PAC Integrity, independent investigative body with authority to audit any territory or alpha. I'd like Elena to lead it." The proposal was smart politics, gave Elena official authority, addressed corruption concerns, and positioned Christine as reform advocate. Marcus should have been suspicious of sudden support from council member who'd spent months operating in shadows. But sometimes cynicism was just exhausted paranoia dressed up as wisdom. "I'll consider it," Elena said before Marcus could respond, "but any position I take comes with conditions. Real authority, not ceremonial. Access to all records without political interference. And if I find corruption, I prosecute regardless of who's involved." Christine smiled. "I'd expect nothing less. We'll discuss terms." The weeks that followed established new routine. Elena officially joined Palace security staff working with Garrett to rebuild protocols that had been compromised by Walsh's infiltration. She maintained distance from traditional mate expectations, choosing her own quarters and schedule, making clear that their relationship was partnership rather than possession. Marcus found himself actually enjoying council meetings when Elena attended her brutal honesty, cutting through political maneuvering like knife through fog. She had no patience for status games or careful language, approaching PAC governance like military operation with objective and tactics. Some council members hated her. Others grudgingly respected her competence. A few genuinely appreciated having someone who treated them like equals rather than obstacles. Marcus fell somewhere between all three, watching Elena integrate into PAC leadership while maintaining the independence that made her dangerous and valuable in equal measure. 3 months after Walsh's death, Marcus found himself in his sanctuary room with Elena, both reviewing case files for new investigation into border territory corruption. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came from hundreds of hours operating together, until Elena spoke without looking up from her papers. "I think this might actually work. The investigation. Us." She finally met his eyes. "I keep waiting for it to fall apart for me to run, or you to realize I'm too damaged to maintain long-term partnership. But it keeps not happening." Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest. "Maybe we're both too stubborn to fail at something we've decided to attempt." "Maybe." Elena smiled, the expression transforming her face from cold professional to something that reminded Marcus why he'd been drawn to her in the first place. "Or maybe we're just lucky enough to find someone equally damaged who understands what it costs to keep trying anyway." "Lucky," Marcus repeated, testing the word. "I haven't felt lucky in a long time." "Me neither." Elena closed the distance between them. "But I'm willing to keep trying if you are." Marcus kissed her, the gesture carrying weight of shared history and uncertain future. It wasn't perfect romance or fairy tale ending. It was two broken soldiers choosing each other despite damage, building partnership from shared trauma and hard-won trust. His wolf settled completely satisfied in ways that went beyond alpha authority or political necessity. This was home, not place or position, but person who understood what service demanded and stood beside him anyway. The blood debt Jason's brother had left 15 years ago would never be fully repaid. But Marcus had honored it as best he could, protecting Jason's investigation, exposing the corruption that killed him, ensuring his friend Iris's daughter grew up knowing justice happened. And in the process, he'd found something he thought died with Sarah 8 years ago. The possibility that happiness and duty didn't have to be mutually exclusive. That leadership could include partnership, that strength sometimes looked like admitting you needed someone and choosing them anyway. Elena pulled back slightly, studying his face. You look less miserable than usual. It's disturbing. Get used to it. I'm experimenting with this radical concept called not being alone all the time. How's that working out? Terrifying and exactly what I needed. Marcus pulled her closer. Thank you for staying, for trying this despite every tactical reason to run. Thank you for being worth the risk. Elena rested her head against his chest, listening to heartbeat that had survived 2 decades of combat and 8 years of grief. Now can we please finish this paperwork so I can go terrorize council members who think corruption is acceptable business practice? Marcus laughed, the sound genuine and unfamiliar. Absolutely. Wouldn't want to interfere with your favorite hobby. They returned to work, two damaged operators building something functional, from shared trauma choosing partnership over isolation, despite knowing how badly it could hurt. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was real and honest and exactly what both of them needed. Outside the sanctuary windows, the sun set over 5 unified territories' imperfect system held together by compromise and stubborn refusal to let corruption win. Inside, two wolves who'd survived impossible odds chose each other, building future from wreckage of their pasts. The blood debt was paid. The investigation was complete. The conspiracy was dismantled. And Marcus Stone, AlphaKing, who'd spent 5 years carrying duty alone, finally understood that strength didn't mean refusing help. It meant finding someone worth trusting with your wounds and choosing them anyway, consequences be damned.